to see you.
So the way that we like to start the discussion is to ask if there were any particular scenes or moments or phrases that stood out or resonated particularly strongly for you. Anything that's sort of standing in the forefront for you. There's no right or wrong answers. It's not a test. But people have different things that stick in their filters. So.
I'm like really pissed off at that ending, frankly. I mean, I think she totally punted. She just,
meaning Theresa Rebeck.
I mean, it really pisses me off because we had to sit through this polemic. And it's like, she's created this, okay, so there's, we all know this can be real, especially in a small office like that. And to me, if she's going to go all the way, I mean, we have to sit, there's no other subplot, you know what I mean? There's nothing else except this male-female, in the workplace dynamic. And then at the end, these people are maybe going to go out on a date. It's like what I was waiting for, especially since she's the woman writing this and being pissed off about how women have so much trouble having talent and being treated equally. Seems to me that, the David guy should be walking in at the end going, you know what, I'm doing a whole office redo and you're now going to be the office manager and I'm firing everyone else and you're going to put me in a crew. I mean, it just like, she's going in that direction, but then she stops. So, that just makes me kind of really stirred up and angry.
Okay. Are there other? Because I mean, this was something that came up yesterday. I mean, that there were some very different opposing ideas or responses to the ending, and one of the things that we were talking about is that we don't really know. I mean, we don't know if she accepts it or he says, yeah, I think I am asking you out on a date, but is it really a date or is it just like, this has been a crappy day? And I mean, he says, this has been nobody's best or, most shining hour, and so let's just get out of here and get a drink. And so, yeah, how much romance is there or is not, or, does she might say, yeah, no, I still don't want to.
The more I think about the ending, because I kept thinking about it last night because we were talking about it, and this morning, I think that Theresa Rebeck is almost like it's another nail in the coffin, because it's like we've set up all this stuff, all this argument. This is what happens in these workplaces. This is what we're going through, and on top of it all, we still get asked out on a date and are expected to maybe reciprocate. And I kept thinking about, wouldn't it be really interesting, like in a full production, to see that reaction? I mean, she writes in her stage directions like, Ben considers her, she considers him, they consider each other. And I was like, man, I want to just like make a really strong decision. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah, but she's already said that he's a coward. He didn't do anything. He is the only one who knew good work. Why would she want to touch him with a 10-foot pole? Because he's so cute.
Well, or that she appreciates that he is somebody who has talent and does know what he's talking about, even
Which
though
makes
he
it
didn't.
worse. Yeah.
But so, anybody?
Well, that's funny because when the date thing came up, I thought he was going to go, no, it's not a date.
Yeah.
This is an apology.
Yeah.
That's what I thought was going to happen. That was what was so odd to me, because he was like, yeah, it is a date. What? No, this would be, no, I'm going to buy you a drink because I owe you at least that. That seems like what I thought it was going to go to. It was a little odd to me that it went that way.
It's odd that it was chosen as a date,
Yeah.
because that is kind of like, it puts you, it now takes you into this, it takes you out of. But I was going to say contextually, I don't see it happening, it kind of sets you up where the resolution, it would be too unrealistic that, personally, I don't know what resonated with the whole play, because I've been in this experience. And, a male dominate, and then, you get the shaft, is what happens. And so, I have to be honest, where, it just, because awareness around the subject matter started, it doesn't mean it's going to resolve, it's going to be business as usual. But what I saw, clumsy, the date was a little clumsy, but I thought the action itself was basically, I'm recognizing you as a person that I'm seeing you as someone that I should get to know, or, troublemaker, ignore you know, woman, whatever it is. It's like, okay, so it was kind of a bridge to that, which is a first step. You know, like you said, we ultimately don't really know what. It was kind of ambiguous also, so.
Yeah, and for me, I kept thinking like females will just make that as an assumption. You know, I just made that assumption that it was a date, and it makes me think about like men and women in the workplace. Like, can they really be friends without really having that come to the forefront? You know, like that date, or they, you know, it's just that difficulty.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Other responses? Yes.
I appreciated the dramatization of it all, and you know, maybe I've had a limited experience, but the language, and I didn't have a problem with the language, just I've never experienced that in the workplace myself. I was wondering if anyone in here has experienced something that, you know, visceral.
Yeah.
You know, it was also something that was brought up last night, and one of the things that was pointed out is that those conversations were behind closed doors between two people. It wasn't in the general meeting so much, you know, like where Stu did kind of lay into Eliza a little in the presentation, but he didn't use that sort of language. It was only the scene between just Stu and Ben, or just Stu and Weber, or just Janice and Eliza. And so I think the conversations that people have behind closed doors are different than necessarily.
Sure.
And I've been in particularly volatile environments where I've worked at a couple of agencies with ad firms, and I'm telling you, the language is not that far off. It's not, and it explodes. There's public explosions, and there's the private behind doors, and then there's the pretending that didn't happen. You know, and so it is kind of. So I kind of felt, of course, I think this was exaggerated, but it's very real where it does happen in certain environments. And I worked at the one agency where it was most volatile. It was all female. It was all female. And it was interesting to see that come out where, you know, there was a lot more volatility on that. You know.
It seems
language and
It seems pretty deliberate that the playwright was using the two words bitch and cunt very deliberately, because it's only obviously in reference to the woman, the one particular woman that they're dealing with. And I was just telling Greg here in the intermission that the language doesn't bother me, but I definitely heard bitch in the workplace. I've never heard cunt in the workplace. And there's a power to that word. And I was thinking of, the only thing I could compare it to is do the right thing. And there's the Danny, I don't know how familiar are people, but Danny Aiello's character, he's trying to keep it makes it so much more powerful that he uses the word nigger at the point that he does when everything's at its climax, that I thought that would have been better, that would have been a better use of that. Not that somebody wouldn't use that word, but that it would be at this really tense moment where, ooh, I guess I am this horrible misogynist, and it comes out at that point. You know, and just the people throwing it around, I'm just like, I don't know if I buy that. I've never seen that in the workplace. I've heard people use the word bitch, but I've never heard cunt in a workplace environment. I don't know.
I haven't heard that. No, I've heard that, the other ones, like, asshole and whatever. And I've heard it in leadership. I've seen it in meetings where people, just sit back and, let them get whatever they have going on out. And, so I have heard, there are certain sharp words like that go beyond.
Yeah, I think when there's certain kinds of personalities that have anger management issues, that, when if you are lucky enough that you haven't had the misfortune of working with one or more of them, and I've encountered a couple,
I've worked with them.
and they'll really let rip with some choice words when they're out there, and so it kind of makes me shudder to imagine what they do say behind closed doors. Like if they're willing to say that in sort of public all staff meetings or whatever, like whoa, okay.
Then I almost would have. I'm not the writer, so it's her choice, but I almost would have preferred that the Stu character be the only one that used it. That he's just kind of loose and drunk, and that he's just. And maybe one of the other characters, it kind of comes out in a moment of frustration, like the Ronald character. I could see, particularly after he's kind of prides himself on being this, you know, philosopher and intellectual, that he goes to something so base as that. But I mean, I didn't write it, so.
Yeah, so I think,
There is the one time when Eliza does call Janice a pussy,
Yeah.
which I find, and that's the most interesting. That one I think about the most.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
as
it's-
a playwright, like
Yeah.
the fact that you drop that in there is
Yeah.
interesting to me.
and it's also, it's interesting that she calls Janice a pussy, but she calls Ben a coward. Where she's kind of expressing the same,
She uses derogatory
but,
language about a
well,
woman.
right, but it's the same thing. She's calling them both cowards.
Right.
The context is the
Right.
same, but
Right.
she uses,
Different language.
yeah, she uses a different
She
word.
felt a little more betrayal with the Janice character though, because they were kind of a friendship, it seemed. And with Ben, who's a little more distant, it seemed.
Well, I think there was a subtext of kind of there was supposed to be you know, hey, we're the only two women in the office. There was supposed to be sort of a partnership there, so I think that makes sense. You know, but then Ben's supposed to be your intellectual equal. I mean, yeah, that's a betrayal as well. At least that's what I got of it.
Well, so, others? How many?
One thing I realized was a little bit of a build-up at the end, where everybody was kind of, it seemed like everybody was so much in isolation, where like people were lashing out at each other, and Eliza was just like on her own, and she was just trying to defend herself. And all of a sudden, towards the end, the gentleman in the middle, you were Stu, right?
Stu's at the end.
In the middle.
Weber.
Weber. And then at the end, Weber just kind of comes into her office, and there wasn't so much defensiveness. He was kind of agreeing with her,
Yeah.
and he was being nice to her. And then when he asked her out, it just made sense. Like you kind of realized that's where it was going. And personally, I've noticed in some situations in offices when certain people feel cornered, and when they have this kind of thing happening, because he's trying to be nice to you, she would realize that and use that as a strategy to bring him on her side and kind of build up her ideas in the office. But whereas in, like, it depends on what kind of beliefs you have, whereas in this situation you just straight said, like, no, my ideas are good enough, like that's how I need to defend it. I don't need to use this to bring more people into this. So I've seen the differences in office situations as well.
Yeah, so trying to win somebody over onto your side to build your case versus
Yeah,
just standing on your principles on your own.
yeah.
Interesting. Other thoughts?
I was actually a little bit surprised. I didn't see the switch in the blueprints coming. I
Oh, I thought that was pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, that was a surprise that she had actually made it look kind of like her solution, and deliberately. I like the line. Clearly, I don't have enough work to do. I like that one. So I didn't see it coming that she would have switched, and I was kind of thinking, it made me think about when I thought it was a real solution that she was offering. You know, I wondered about that. It implies that she judged the situation correctly by giving the wrong blueprint to the woman who then toadies up to the other guy. That implies that that's the correct,
Oh yeah, she read it, yeah.
right. But it would be interesting. I mean, you know, it would be interesting to have seen it play out with an actual real gesture
Of kindness or
of cooperation,
reconciliation.
throws her under the bus, where just Janice did give her the number and tell her to call the person. And so I think that jettisoned any possibility of Eliza then coming to her and trying to help her. I think she was pissed off enough after that meeting that she came up with a scheme and knew that it would play out, and she was right. And that she played it just perfectly, because she knew how to say, oh, well, yeah, if you don't think that you know enough to judge this, you should show it to Ben, knowing that that would be exactly what would keep Janice from going to Ben, to suggest that, oh, you need to get somebody else's approval of it. And so, yeah, knowing, oh, she'll just go right to Stu with it. She won't take it with her. She won't take it to Ben.
I'm just glad I don't work in that work.
Yes. That's right. It's just a character. Everybody here is just playing a character.
I don't like Stu much.
I don't either.
Mike, he said one time in rehearsal, he's like, I really think we should try this monologue this way, because it just makes him that much more of an asshole.
Well, in the review meeting, and Stu was just cornering her, I mean, that was very frustrating. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
just being so mean, so obviously just mean, unfair, not listening to pretty logical arguments.
And that's kind of run of the mill in my experience. I mean, that's
I've seen
the-
that.
that was one of the things in last night's discussion as well, and some of the comments on the surveys. There were some people who were like, that's so outdated and that would never happen, and things aren't like that anymore. And it's like, oh, yes it is.
And it's not just sex-based, it's sometimes they don't like the person-based too. I mean, it is often sex-based, but it can be based on other things, I think.
True, but so that for those of us who have experienced it firsthand, like we can attest to how realistic it is, and that it's not really that exaggerated. I mean, that's what's so unbelievable when you do encounter it in life, and it's like, yeah, where are the cameras?
Kind of cloaking prejudice, trying to cloak the prejudice in professionalism and logic, when it's really still...
Right, or the whole thing when Stu is talking about, what would she say if she could hear? So she'd be like, oh, they said this and they said that, and they call me a bitch and they don't like me because I'm, and that some of that assumption as well of the divide of, well, this is what women believe men are talking about or saying about them in the workplace, and this is what men believe women are saying, the assumption of whether the girls are going to stick together and be friends just because they are girls or not, or whether there is more competition. So yes, it can just be cat fight, and they'll take each other out, because there's certainly some camps that believe that, and say, oh, well, women can't work together because they all hate each other and they can't be friends. Or that, they're having coffee and they're shopping all the time, and they're friends because they're girls.
See, and wait, I just have to break in about this whole girl thing, because I grew up, when I was growing up, and Gloria Steinem and all these people were saying, do not say girl. We fought a lot about saying woman, and now girl is endemic in the entire society. You're sitting saying that girl word without any consciousness.
No, it was conscious because that's what it was said in the script.
Yeah,
And it
but
was a
I'm
conscious decision
but
Theresa
it's
made.
all over now. It's as if we never thought about it. It's as if the whole acknowledgement of grown women as women never happened.
Right, I think that's the point, though. I think that's why Theresa chose that word.
And it's not even conscious. No, I'm just saying whether she chose it or not, it's not even something that's going to register to anybody younger, because they're so used to, 70-year-old girls. Betty White calling herself a fucking girl at 92 years old. I mean, it's like, when does a woman get to be a woman anymore? It doesn't happen. And I was thinking about the generation gap too, though. Even though young women, really young women might use the word girl, they wouldn't put up with it any more than the Eliza character would. And I think that generation gap is also interesting. I think it's interesting that there isn't a generation gap sort of written in here, because the Weber
use that language as well. I mean, my nephews do, and I, bonk them on the head when they do and point it out to them. But it's still as endemic. I mean, I think that's the larger point of why she wrote this. Why? Because the first scene was originally written in 1992 as a 10-minute play. It was just the first scene, and that was it. And then in 2010, yes, and talking about the woman. And so then in 2010, she expanded it into a full-length script, and that, again, a lot of it is in response to the challenges that she's experienced being a woman in a male-dominated workplace. And the fact is that, yeah, people think, oh, we're, post-racist, post-sexist society. These things aren't an issue anymore. It's like, yes, they absolutely are. And just because people say we're post-racist or post-sexist doesn't mean it actually that we really are. And so I think that was part of the point of drawing attention to, yes, it does still happen, and it's not Mad Men. It's not, this isn't set in 1962. This is set today, because it is still happening, and that the people still do. That some of it is because, as Stu says, it's a system. The system is still in place, and there are people who continue to play by the rules within the system and try to make the system work for them and to their advantage, which is something that Weber is skilled at doing. He knows how to say the right things at the right time to the right people to work to his advantage. And Eliza is less willing to do that. She wants to be acknowledged for the merit of her talent and abilities and what she brings to the table in that sense. And I think Janice is still trying to work within the system. And, for a year, she had no projects, and they would ask her to get coffee. And she stuck it out. She was patient and waited. But as Eliza then says, they like women who are mediocre because they're easier to dismiss. So that whether that's just Eliza's view of Janice, whether Janice really is stupid, or doesn't have talent or not. I mean, the idea of what happens if we just yank all the ducks out might not have been the brightest idea, but it was a question. But Janice might have, hid her light under a bushel in order to get along, in order to be able to stay for 3 years in this place. Because 5 months, and Eliza's ready to set fire to the building, pretty much. So the idea that the system still exists, and that there are ways to work within the system, there's ways to work against the system, but to say that the system isn't still in place is not a helpful, or that it's not, that's living in denial. That's not going to make things possible, I guess. Sort of lost the point. But, I don't know, so what do you all think about that?
Denial is not a river in Egypt.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I grew up with a lot of Asian friends and talked kind of the idea of prejudice. And, from my point of view, growing up with them and being friends and equals, and we rib each other a little bit on racial lines and stuff, but nothing major. But, I'd ask them years later when we're adults, did you hit some things, some prejudices? And they said, oh yeah, this guy called me this word, So even though a lot of people like me aren't always aware of the issues that are out there, they are out there. And I've had several women bosses, and from what I could see, which is very limited, I tend to kind of focus. I didn't see problems, but I know they had to hit problems.
Well, and that's what I think for a lot of people, it's harder to see or recognize it until you are on the receiving end. Because it startles me every single time. Because I think, oh, no, they can't possibly be saying what I think they're saying. Like, really? That's and so and I've had some other friends also who, that tend to be white men who they have been more the majority, you know, that they haven't been a particular target. And so they think, oh, things are great. And it's like, yeah, things are great for you. Because you haven't been on the receiving end.
And the women bosses I had have been perfectly good and fair, and I personally didn't have a problem with it. But, you know, I know there was probably other men, not that I'm so enlightened, but I just didn't have any issues. Maybe there was other people that had issues and sex became an issue.
Well, I think what happens is when anybody experiences some sort of prejudice and they have real concrete experiences with it, it's just human nature, you're going to see it in some cases when it's not there. But, and I think that's interesting when it happens. And then conversely, if you don't experience it, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
So.
Because I figure, you know, I'm able to be a subordinate to a woman, and she's treated me fairly. I felt like there was no problem, but that doesn't mean that's everyone's. Some other people may have other issues, and probably a lot of time it does happen. And you know, obviously you can't generalize to everyone, but there might be enough of a minority where it's a problem that it makes your life hell. It only takes like a few percent to screw things. You know?
Yeah, well, and that's also why I think this play is interesting. It's a way of bringing to light experience and so again, like there have been some really kind of divided responses to it, where people have been like, "That's not how it is," and other people saying, "Yes, it is. It's exactly like it." And so that's one of the reasons why I chose the script, to provide the opportunity to kind of have these discussions. And so.
Just curious, is the biggest problem people have with it the language? Has that been the most? No,
actually, there hasn't.
Or is it the claim that this just doesn't happen?
Someone said last night that I think he was a mental health therapist, or something along the lines of that, and he felt very strongly that in his workplace, that this, you know, in the situations that he deals with, no one would ever do that, say that, treat anyone that way. You know, that was from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you know, and
there's
felt like
training and
there's so much training in place now, and things, you know, happening that it would never take place.
I think that rings true for certain professions.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
The nursing profession in particular
Has
is
tried really hard.
hugely feminized, as has teaching, and of course it's sort of flipped over, and some areas like that. But architecture in particular wouldn't surprise me. Advertising,
Well, actually, there were some people who said no, architecture that would not. But
I mean, I'm just saying that I don't know because I'm not an architect. But it wouldn't surprise me, and certainly in certain engineering, a lot of places where there aren't as many women, it wouldn't surprise me. In the military.
yeah, I mean, but in answer to your question, I mean, actually, people had more of an issue with the drinking in the office when they said no.
I guess I found that kind of odd too, because I haven't had that experience, but maybe it is allowed in some places, because I was like, they can drink in their office.
It was end of day though.
Yeah.
All of the drinks that people were having was at the end of the day.
But it sounded like he was pouring drinks in his office. I just find that.
Well, Eliza did.
Yeah.
She poured a drink.
Right.
Which
And in
is,
some
really
offices,
surprising.
I mean, I can tell you right now,
Yeah.
like, my husband works in the video game industry, and you walk into that building, and there is free-flowing alcohol in that building.
I was gonna say pretty much every company I work for.
Like, in
Really?
software, I mean, like, in creative industries, yeah. I mean, not at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
But after
Where I work,
12:30?
sometimes 11 in the morning. Only certain select individuals. Because no one frowned on it. It was just like part of the
On a
culture.
Saturday morning.
No, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But it wasn't so much where they got intoxicated. But a beer on the desk, no big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked a lot of places where most of the staff had a bottle in their desk. Well, yeah, that at the end of the day, or if it was a really rough day, that they would have a drink. Yeah.
Or after a shower.
Yeah, no.
Dressing rooms, it seems like you can't do a show, a dressing room's got at least a bottle or two in it, somewhere you can always find something after to relax.
But most shows are usually in the evening, so it's after cocktail hour.
Sunday
It's
matinees.
always, it's 5:30 somewhere.
5:30 somewhere.
representing, or even advertising, if you're representing like an alcohol company or like a liquor store, if they show up to your office and people don't have that liquor and they're not drinking it, then they get mad at you. They're like, you're representing us, but you're not drunk off our so what's going on? You have to really experience it, and that's
right, you're not doing your part for the company.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that made this for me to, believable and all, was that Janice was not just a bimbo and not just she had some real points that she made to Eliza.
Eliza.
That it was how she coped or whatever, but it made it more believable to me that she was, she spoke strong convictions.
That's my favorite speech in the play.
Yeah.
I mean, when she says, come on here, you're coming in here and laying all this bullshit on me because I'm the other woman.
Yeah.
So I have to take that. I like that.
Well, and the idea of, I've been here for 3 years, and you come in 5 months, you pissed everyone else off. And so the idea of being the groundbreaker, like having to break down those barriers, being the trailblazer, and having had to swallow the fair amount of shit to be able to sustain. And then the people who come in after don't always realize what a battle it's been. And so, yeah, she said, you're making us look, like, you're making me look bad. The way that you're coming in and behaving, it is reflecting on me. And so just because we are both girls doesn't mean I'm going to take your side and support you. And it was, it kind of was reminding me of, I don't know if you saw The Story when we did that in 2007 about an African-American journalist and a couple of, you might have seen that one at the Erickson. And so the older black editor is talking to the young reporter who's coming in and who kind of expects to have a lot right away. And she's sort of like, you don't understand what we fought to get what we have now. And so, yeah, there is a certain amount, and you can't behave that way because it reflects badly on all of us. And the idea that we might lose what we gained because of some of the impetuousness, or that there was a sense of that I felt was kind of echoing in what Janice was saying to Eliza, of like, hey, yeah, you're going to drag us all back into the kitchen barefoot and pregnant, ease up.
Well, that is often the conflict when there is something to fight for. And I saw a recent documentary on PBS about freedom riders. And freedom riders were, by and large, all young. And their elders were in great conflict with them over even doing this thing of riding in and going to whites only this and it took successes in breaking down some of that for their elders to say, okay, not only do we understand what you're doing, but now we understand that it's moving things forward in a way that we hadn't been able to move forward. So, but it is really threatening every time. So,
well, right, and to not ignore or overlook the sacrifices that were made beforehand. Yeah.
Incremental, and then younger people are often not.
Well, but I mean, like what you were saying earlier about,
to be fair, not all of her actions are brave and enlightened in that sort of way. Right? Some of her actions are frankly like, deceitful and underhanded.
But she's not patient. So
right.
She's been patient, and that's not working for her, and she's ready to shake it up. All I'm saying is that what's left to her. If being patient is not left to her anymore, then pretty much anything is going to look, obstructive and deceitful, and and certainly, if she does have the ear of the big boss, then she does have more
surprise ending where she set them up, you know, for failure. But I was almost kind of wondering if Ben wasn't going to come to her office and go, "I finally seen this for the first time. I recognize it's yours, but did you know the carbon monoxide is going into the food court? You were so damn close, but you know, just a few more, you know, a little bit more experience, and you would have gotten that great." You know what I mean? And I'm kind of wondering if you guys thought that might be that'd be kind of an interesting thing, that she is really good, and she's better than everybody there except for maybe the Ben character. I thought that would be I thought that'd be kind of an interesting direction to go with it. Did any of you think that's what it was going to be when you got to that part in the play?
I didn't,
No.
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 Because more,
I guess I like the fact that she's deceitful and manipulative.
No, I thought
Because for me, it pulls it back from being too much of a polemic. And it makes it.
well, and also that she's more justified in
Yeah.
her outrage
Right.
at being overlooked.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so for me, it was, I knew that Ben had been sitting in the conference room looking at her design for the law office, and so that's why he knew that she was talented.
Right.
Rather than, you came up with a bad design, so we were right in not allowing you to work, and
Yeah, I guess that would throw it out. That would throw it all
go
off.
back
But
to square one.
yeah, but I like the surprise ending of those.
The only other thing I was thinking about the ending was I was thinking maybe Ben was going to say to her, "You know what? Screw this office. You and I should open a firm together."
Actually, for a brief second, I thought that's what was gonna happen for a second.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for staying and participating in the discussion. And again, our next show is in April. It's a play called Ground by Lisa Dillman. There's information in the program and on the website. And tickets go on sale March 1st for that.